Oh, hi, I'm Kent Myers. Welcome to The Verdict. I was just doing a little reading. Reading one of the books written by our guest today, Bob Burke, Oklahoma's biographer, Laureate. We have in Oklahoma a literary treasure that walks around and practices law and visits with a lot of Oklahoma Cityans every day. His name is Bob Burke. He has written more nonfiction historical books than anyone. Yes, anyone. And we're going to have him as our guest today to talk about the people he's written about, the interesting stories he knows about, and what he's got on the drawing board for the future. We think you'll find this show to be interesting. We think you'll find it to be informative, and I will tell you up front, these are just half of the books that Bob has written. We didn't have room for the rest. Mick Cornett's not with us today. He'll be back soon, but he is still looking to come on the show probably next week. Let's take a break. Go to hear from our sponsors, and then when you come back, you'll be listening to Bob Burke. You're watching The Verdict.
For one Oklahoma-based company, success didn't happen overnight. Initially, the days were long, 80-hour weeks common. As we grew, we wanted to share our success, and the ideals of corporate and civic responsibility found a welcome home. Today, we're the largest investor in the Sooner State and a source for exciting, new, high-quality jobs. We're Chesapeake Energy, committed to building a better Oklahoma.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality, assistance, and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
Hi, I'm Court Diffie. With all of the change that has taken place in the car industry in the past decade here in Oklahoma, it's hard to find a family-run business anymore. One of the things that makes us different, that if you visit any one of our 3 locations, you're going to find one of our family members there ready to help you. Does that really make any difference? We really believe it does. So I invite you to come out and experience the Diffie family difference and decide for yourself.
Welcome back to The Verdict. I'm Kent Myers, got all those books read in the break, and we're now ready to talk to the author. We are very pleased today to bring you Bob Burke. Bob is a native of Broken Bow, Oklahoma, is a graduate of the University of Oklahoma with a degree in journalism, graduate of Oklahoma City University with a law degree, practices law in Oklahoma, is described as an attorney, author, historian. This is Bob's second visit to The Verdict. And he has written more nonfiction historical books than anybody that anybody knows about. And we're pleased to have you here, Bob, to talk about some of that, because most of all of your writing, I know, is concentrated about people in Oklahoma and Oklahoma events and places. And that's what our viewers want to hear about. So welcome to The Verdict.
Hey, thank you for having me.
First thing I've got to ask you, before we get into any particular book, is how in the world do you find time? You must be the walking advertisement for time management. How do you find time to have an active law practice, which I know you have, and to write as much as you do?
The key is getting up early. The early bird does get the worm. I, since high school, have gotten up very early in the morning, so often I get 3 hours of writing in at the office before I ever begin my law practice day. I usually go to the workers' comp court around 9 o'clock, but many times I have 3 hours of writing before then. It's quiet in the morning, nobody there, nobody calling. I sit at my computer and tell the great stories of Oklahoma.
When did you think, I'm going to start writing some things? I'm going to try to pull some things together for posterity's sake.
I was actually 39, had never thought of writing a book until when David Boren was in the Senate in Washington. I spent a lot of time with his parents here in Oklahoma City when they were yet alive, and played dominoes with Lyle. And Lyle, of course, was the youngest man ever elected to the Congress, wonderful Oklahoman, who had these great stories back in the Depression of serving with Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman. He and Christine lived in the same rooming house with Harry and Bess Truman, played poker on Monday nights with Harry Truman and so many others. And I thought somebody ought to write these stories down. So I joined up with one of my law school professors, Von Creel. Von and I wrote Lyle's biography, and it became a passion, or my wife would say an obsession. And so here it is 18 years later, and 59 books, and another 6 or 7 to come out in the next 6 months or so.
Well, that's what I was going to emphasize for our viewers, is that you've written 59 books, and you've got a good number on the drawing board going to come out. And I just don't see how you get it all done.
I'm trying to catch Louis L'Amour. Louis L'Amour, who's been dead for 30 years, wrote 104 books, but by the time I reach 65, I plan to pass Louis.
Well, you've got a fixed target in
I
any
do,
event.
I do.
How do you decide what you're going to write about? What topics are interesting to you that you want to spend the time and do the work necessary to get the job done?
Well, as a great lover of Oklahoma history, I like to write about people or subjects that I'm interested in. Although I make myself, as a matter of discipline, every third book or so to write about someone who nobody has heard of, but who nevertheless has played an integral part in Oklahoma's exciting history.
Well, I noticed some of your books you're the solo author,
Yes.
and some of the books you have co-authors. How do you decide which is appropriate, and when do you do a solo and when do you do co-author?
A lot of projects, especially if someone is alive like George Nye, I spent all the time with George and was the sole author. There are other projects of where I do for a reason that the co-author might have a special connection to that family. For instance, I've just finished a Robert S. Kerr Jr. biography. Ron Cupp at the Oklahoma State Chamber of Commerce is my co-author because Ron worked for the Kerr Foundation, or worked for Bob Kerr's Water Foundation for many years as a young man. So he has this special feeling for what Bob Kerr Jr. was doing in developing Oklahoma's water resources during those years. Also, if I have a co-author, I can write twice as many books because I might have a co-author. For instance, Judge Ralph Thompson and I wrote the famous Bryce Harlow biography. Judge Thompson was doing all the interviews while I was doing other research and then writing the first draft of the book. So it helps me write more books by having really good co-authors.
Let's talk about a few of the books you've written about political figures. We're going to later talk about other types of people that do other things. But let's talk about the Bryce Harlow book. That did win an award for being the Outstanding Oklahoma History Book of the Year, presented by the Historical Society, I think.
Wonderful project. Again, Bryce Harlow I never knew much about. I was sitting by Henry
For
Kissinger.
our viewers' purposes, tell us who Bryce Harlow was.
He was a
or what
little
he did.
5'4", 120-pound guy from Oklahoma City Central High School who went to Washington and became the most powerful power broker in the nation's capital in the 20th century. And that's not my idea, but those are the words of Henry Kissinger, who wrote the foreword to the book. He wrote all of President Eisenhower's 8 State of the Union messages, was Eisenhower's closest advisor, was Richard Nixon's first cabinet member appointed, first hiree after Rosemary Wood, after Nixon was elected president. An incredibly powerful figure who never tooted his own horn, and we never heard much about him here in Oklahoma. In fact, when that book came out, it sold more copies in New York and Washington, D.C. than it did here in Oklahoma City.
You mentioned briefly that Judge Ralph Thompson, a federal judge in the Western District, was your co-author on that. How did you get Judge Thompson involved with that?
Well, Judge Thompson has been a friend of mine for years, and we wanted to write a book together, and he had a great love for the Harlow family because Jim Harlow, who was Bryce Harlow's nephew, was Ralph Thompson's roommate in college. So again, there was this special connection with the Harlow family. And Judge Thompson had so much fun doing that because he interviewed 2 presidents. He had been given a 10-minute time slot with President Gerald Ford to interview on the telephone. But Harlow was such an important part of Gerald Ford's life that 90 minutes later, finally it was Judge Thompson who's saying, "Mr. President, I've really got to go back to court," because the federal court had been shut down for the time. But Mr. Integrity was the name of that book, and Gerald Ford said that Bryce Harlow from Oklahoma City knew more about Congress than anyone who ever lived. A great testament.
How did you get Henry Kissinger to write the foreword for that book?
Well, I had asked him, but he absolutely volunteered to do so because he and Harlow shared an office in the Nixon White House. And Henry Kissinger, for instance, said that if Bryce Harlow or if Nixon had listened closer to Bryce Harlow, Watergate would have never happened. Harlow was in the center of the federal government for so many years under 4 different presidents, but Kissinger was excited to do so. People were walking over themselves trying to write the foreword to that book because they all thought so much of Harlow.
Great reviews on that book. Let me focus on, in about a minute or so,
Okay.
if you can, tell us who is the most memorable, no-name person that you've written about.
Probably John J. Hardin. John J. Hardin was the richest Oklahoman in the 1920s, built the farmers market in 1927 in Oklahoma City, was so powerful that when he built the farmers market, he was able to get the Oklahoma City City Council to pass an ordinance saying that no one could sell fresh vegetables or milk anywhere in Oklahoma City except through the farmers market. Can you imagine someone having the power to do that today? He was incredibly behind the scenes, was a horrible father, was not a great father or a great husband, but built the largest hotel in Acapulco during World War II. Developed not only the farmers market but Roselawn Cemetery, had a lock on the asphalt business in Oklahoma. John Kilpatrick, for whom the Turnpike is named, says that's my best preservation of history because there's so much Oklahoma City history in that that's not told anywhere else.
We're going to get to a lot more history in just a second.
Okay.
We're going to have to leave for a break. We're visiting with Bob Burke, Oklahoma's biographer, Laureate, who has written more historical nonfiction books than anybody, anywhere, anytime, anyhow. And we'll come back after a couple of minutes and take up the discussion on some sports figures and other types of books Bob has written. You're watching The Verdict.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And Blankenship has stopped at the line of scrimmage. No gain on the play. Leaving it 4th and 7 on the Tiger 46-yard line. 38 seconds on the clock. The Tigers have no choice but to go for it. Wiggins in to do the kicking. Here's the snap. And the kick is away.
R.S.M. McGladrey. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. R.S.M. McGladrey. In Oklahoma City, the phone number is 405-843-5311.
Welcome back to The Verdict. I'm Kent Myers. Mick Cornett will join us in a show or two. He's absent today. We're visiting today with Bob Burke, Oklahoma's biographer laureate, as we have coined
I love that
the phrase.
title. I love that title.
Well, you can have it.
Okay.
You can use it. I'll give it to you. We've been talking with Bob about some of the books he's written. Now, I want to focus on a category of subject that you've written on, and that is sports figures. Let me ask you about one of my personal favorites, and that's Allie Reynolds. I know you did a book on Allie.
Yes, and I did. And I talked to Allie before he died and said, I'd really like to do a book about you, but you know what an humble guy he was.
Oh,
he
yes.
says, oh, I've done nothing. I've done nothing but play baseball. So I had to wait until after Allie was gone to write that book, but that was wonderful. Warren Spahn, before he died, wrote the foreword to the book. Allie was an humble guy who never forgot his Oklahoma roots. He loved Oklahoma dearly, of course, settled here, was a businessman here after his years as a New York Yankee. I'm a New York Yankee fan today because of Allie Reynolds and Mickey Mantle being from Oklahoma.
I suspect Allie Reynolds is the guy that's closest to the Hall of Fame, to being elected into the Hall of Fame, that may never make it.
Yeah, may never, and I hate that. I wanted his book to be a springboard for that, and he got very close. And I hope to do that again sometime. Yogi Berra has promised me that he will do everything in his power to keep alive the spirit of Allie Reynolds being in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Oh, he's a fine gentleman with a fine family.
Oh, yes.
Let's talk about a guy who you just can't hardly mention his name without grinning, and that's Abe Lemons, a longtime OCU, Pan American University, Texas basketball coach.
You know, what a great guy. I wrote Abe's book while he was alive and spent many hours at his home. Abe, of course, was in funny, sitting around a table in his den as he is in front of an audience. USA Today chose one of his sayings as the sports quote of the 20th century. He said, "Doctors bury their mistakes. Ours are still on scholarship." Although, Keith, my favorite Abe Lemons story is he said in his next life he doesn't want to be a basketball coach, but he wants to be a track coach because it's a lot easier, because all you do is tell your kids to keep left and don't stop till you come back. Or maybe my favorite, I can go on for 2 hours on this, maybe my favorite is he said he wanted to be a football coach because you can't lose more than 11 games in a season, and he's lost that many in February some years. Abe was a treasure. When we lost Abe, Oklahoma lost a true treasure.
Who did you work with on the Abe Lemons book?
Kenny Franks, who is my mentor, who was a professor at Oklahoma State University for a long time and is retired now. But Kenny and I wrote a number of books together, and so we worked on the Abe Lemons book together. Bobby Knight wrote the foreword to that because he considered Abe Lemons his mentor in life.
Did you have conversations with Knight about doing the foreword and all?
Oh, absolutely. And then afterwards, I've had 2 or 3 conversations with Bob, who doesn't want to be called Bobby. We're both Bobbies in life, but we like to be called Bob rather than Bobby, although Bobby's always called Bobby. But he loved the book very much.
Did you, by chance, get to meet his wife, who was
I did.
originally from Oklahoma?
Yes, an Oklahoma girl.
Yeah.
I remind him of that he's married to an Oklahoma girl, which he says is the best part of his life.
Well, we'd agree with that.
That's right.
Finally, the last sports figure I want to ask you about is a man that lived right by me while he was living, Bill Teagans,
yes.
the voice of the OSU Cowboys and a sportscaster at
yes.
Channel 9 and the like, who tragically died.
Yes, Bill was a friend of mine. I served for a number of years on the Jim Thorpe board with him and the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame board. Janice Teagans, Bill's widow, came to me after the death and felt like she needed to write a book. So I worked with her. That's the only of my 59 books that I cried while writing it. A sad story, yet what a wonderful life. And anybody who knew Bill, I think they've enjoyed that book very much. Coach Eddie Sutton wrote a foreword, and a brief story about that. Coach Sutton calls me from a recruiting trip on the East Coast, and it was time for him to give me the foreword, and he said, "Bob, I've never written a foreword before." I said, "Oh, no problem, Coach. Send it on and we'll edit it." Never changed a word. It is literally a solemn, anointed foreword to that book because Coach Sutton loved Bill Teagans very much.
What qualities about Bill Teagans engendered that kind of affection in people?
I think integrity, because he was one of those few people who could do OSU broadcasts, but then do the OU coaches show all in the same week during the football season. And neither university thought that he was going to tattle on the other one. But during the same time that he was the voice of the OSU Cowboys, he was doing the OU coaches show, all in the same week. Nobody questioned his integrity. Honesty, many times, I've said in speeches, is better than skill.
And he could come in our backyard and visit about something that was going on, and you'd never know he was a person of prominence at all.
In fact, when he was killed in the plane crash, Channel 9 and Janice received more than 8,000 cards and emails. And there was a current theme, a common theme throughout them, that said, Bill came into our living room every night, and we believed we knew him. Even though we've never met him in real life, we thought of him as a friend.
Fine gentleman.
Yes.
Let's change the subject a little bit and talk about some jurists. You've written about some judges, and some more solemn than others. But let's talk about the late Alma Wilson.
Alma, of course, was the first woman appointed at the Oklahoma Supreme Court. George and I did that in 1978. Fine, fine woman, a diminutive woman who surely, Justice Cogger said that surely when Alma died and went to heaven, that you could hear the clickety-click of those heels going down the halls of heaven. A wonderful lady, very smart lady, who graced our Supreme Court for many years until her death.
What did she contribute to Oklahoma jurisprudence? I don't mean any particular case, but what qualities did she bring to the bench that served lawyers, clients, and judges well?
Hate to overuse a word, but integrity. Yeah. Because nobody questioned where Alma stood on any subject. She was very smart, and she would research. If she wrote an opinion, you could know that she had her facts right, she had the cases right, and even if you did not agree with the ultimate opinion that she rendered in that decision, you knew that she came to that opinion honestly.
Yeah, my impression of Alma Wilson, having appeared before her a number of times, was that she was firm but never mean.
Oh no, not mean at all. Wonderful lady.
Let's lighten it up a little
Okay.
bit and talk about Lee West.
Well,
the Honorable Lee West.
Lee West has become one of my best friends. I tell you, I enjoyed, Judge David Russell and I teamed up to write Judge West's biography.
And the title of it was?
Is Law and Laughter.
Yes.
And that describes, Lee West is just one of the genuinely funny, good guys of the world.
Could have been a stand-up comedian.
Oh, he could be. He's so wonderful when to talk to him. Again, he's kind of like Abe. He is the same in person as he is on stage or behind the bench, whatever. A great jurist. Behind that incredible facade of being the life of the party is a very brilliant jurist, and
Yes.
no one should ever forget that. He is a brilliant retired senior judge now, or on senior status, but because he likes to hunt a lot, you know, because he's one of the great bird hunters. What's unique about that book is that Henry Bellman wrote the foreword to it. Now, Lee West is as yellow dog Democrat as you can get from Antlers, Oklahoma, and Henry Bellman a conservative Republican. But they both men of integrity, honesty, hard work, both from the country, and so it made a great team there.
In about 30 seconds, just tick off what's coming out in the future.
Okay, Robert S. Kerr Jr.
Right.
called Mr. Water. Luke Corbett, Chairman and CEO of Kerr McGee, has done the foreword to that book. A Guide to the State's Historical Markers ought to be out soon. A family history of the Marlin family and the history of the Marlin Mansion.
Ponca City.
Yes, Ponca City, I might say, the most intriguing story in Oklahoma history. Governor, or E.W. Marlin, the founder of Conoco, married his adopted daughter after they annulled the adoption, and then was elected governor of Oklahoma. Why does that happen? Because Alfalfa Bill Murray had been governor for 4 years. We would have elected anyone. But it's an intriguing story of Oklahoma history.
Bob, thank you for coming. We've
Thank
got
you.
to call it to a halt here. You're watching Bob Burke on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
That land next door was a mess. Take more than a lawnmower to revive that land. I heard the oil and natural gas people was cleaning up old oil sites, and it wouldn't cost us a blood nickel. Oh yes, sir, it was quite a revival. The whole church showed up, want to make a playground for the kids. It sure is a blessing.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
Welcome back to The Verdict. I'm Kent Myers. Thanks to Bob Burke for joining us and talking to us about the wonderful accumulation of literature he's given Oklahoma readers, given you and I hope we'll all take advantage of reading some of them, particularly his newer books that are getting ready to come out. Our next show is going to be a debate. We're going back to our verdict roots and have a debate between two constitutional law scholars on whether or not the phrase "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance is constitutional or not. We'll do that next week. We'll look forward to seeing you. For Mick Cornett, I'm Kent Myers. Thanks for joining us on The Verdict.
The preceding program was produced by the Production Services Group at Cox Communications, exclusively for the Cox Channel.